Hey, everybody, look who is here with me in the stream, Dr. Robert Malone. And he is going to talk about all kinds of exciting things, not the least of which is this is why you were late for our last stream, right, Dr. Malone?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for being so patient.
No problem. So tell me what happened.
So this little colt was born last Sunday, about 3 weeks premature. And he separated normally. It's an experienced dam. Her name's Tantra. And he hasn't been named yet. And he was doing okay, but not thriving as much as we would like. And then we noticed him dripping from his umbilical cord. And we know that's not a veterinary emergency, but it's something you got to get on right away because it could have various causes. And so he went to surgery quickly and just got discharged today after a pretty long surgery yesterday for a large umbilical abscess, which normally they don't catch before the foal goes septic. So yay, we got him this time and saved him. And he's doing great, but when we got the call that he was ready for discharge, we had to jump, and I apologize to your audience for the delay.
No, please don't. As one horse person to another, I'm glad that everything is okay, and I totally understand. It's the price we pay for having life with animals and in the country, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. So we can always talk about controversial topics another time, which is the great thing about YouTube, is that you can start your stream at any point in time, and they can also cancel your stream at any point in time, which is why I'm going to give this quick disclaimer before we get into this. As many of you all know, you saw the title that Dr. Malone is an inventor of mRNA vaccines. And Dr. Malone, I want to talk to you before we nuke this stream and continue it on ROKFIN. I'm going to post the link in the chat, y'all, so you can get that link and follow us there. I want everybody to know that I had a video removed for medical misinformation not too long ago. And so if I get another strike, I will be in YouTube jail. And I have made the decision that I'm not going to beat YouTube at its own game, but I am going to game YouTube back. And so I'm going to continue using it to push people to other platforms where you can have conversations that allow for journalism and science to occur, because journalism and science both require bringing up new ideas and questioning things and not just repeating government talking points. And unfortunately, that's the only thing you're really allowed to do on YouTube. So just FYI, okay, we're talking about some interesting but sanitized stuff with Dr. Malone for about 15 minutes, and then we're going to continue the stream on ROKFIN. If you're watching this after the fact, link will be in the description for where you can go see it. It will be on my other platforms. Locals will have it. It'll be up on ODYSEE. But if you want to watch live and participate in the chat, make sure you're watching on ROKFIN. I'm going to put the link in the chat. Okay, so Dr. Malone, why don't you first tell us who you are? Give us the Dr. Malone Reader's Digest background version, other than Horseman.
Yeah. Well, I was a farmer. I've been a farrier and a ranch hand, but that's not why you're here. I'm a physician scientist. I'm trained at Northwestern for my medical degree, UC Davis for my biochemistry degree, the Salk Institute in UC San Diego for my master's degree, would have been a PhD, and that's another story, and Harvard Medical School for my fellowship in global clinical research, and UC Davis for my fellowship and internship in pathology. I taught pathology to medical students at Davis and at U Maryland for many years. The reason we're here is because of what I did as a graduate student between 1987 and 1989. But I since had an academic career for many years and discovered other things, helped start Inovio, was involved in other startups, was at a startup called Vical when I left the Salk. And then after 9/11 and the anthrax attacks, the investors for Inovio pulled back because they were afraid of investing in North America, in the United States. And a colleague opened a door for me at a place called Dyneport Vaccine Company in Frederick, Maryland. I was at Rockville at the time. And I became a associate clinical director for a company that had the what we call prime systems contract for the Department of Defense for all biodefense products. And so that's when I really dove into the biodefense space and what we call advanced development, which is taking things at the stage when they're about to go into the clinic and then through to licensure. So I had exposure to most of the biowarfare pathogens. I've had secret clearance. And since that time, I've intentionally pivoted to becoming someone who's a specialist in that advanced development world, so getting things licensed and taking them through the FDA. A lot of what I do over the last decade or so has involved building teams to solve complicated problems for the government. Typically, I also serve other clients. I was very involved in the West African Ebola outbreak and spearheaded the product that we now call the Merck Ebola vaccine. I brought that from a earlier stage product on behalf of New Link and the Department of Defense, and then got Merck involved and brought that through. I started off as an undergraduate at Davis in a laboratory that had the initial discoveries relating to retroviral origin of AIDS using a primate model, and spent a lot of time there working on mouse memory tumor virus for breast cancer. So I'm kind of a virologist, pathologist, molecular biologist, molecular virologist, and specialist in advanced development. I probably won well over $2 billion for my clients for grants and contracts. And during this current outbreak, it's about 130 million. So I understand the government and how it works, and I understand industry. I've worked in that sector. I've worked for Gates related nonprofits. I kind of covered the landscape.
Okay, to say that you have done a lot is an understatement. And I hope that whoever's watching in YouTube after this takes your bona fides and
doesn't
takes
delete
them
both of
into
us.
account. Well, it's funny because when I wrote my appeal for my latest strike that I got, I said, please send me the information that or I wanted them to show me information that there's no information possible that my guest could be right. Obviously, there's information out there that he could be wrong, right? Because there's information debated in science all the time. So they could, of course, find stuff that the person was wrong. But I wanted them to show me that there was nothing out there that said he could possibly be right, and who their experts were and whatever. Of course, they don't write me back anything. I get nothing back. It just says, no, we've determined that, you violated our medical misinformation policy. Again, and just a disclaimer, if you're just joining us, we're going to be moving the stream over to ROKFIN and canceling this one here on YouTube very soon, just to protect the conversation so that we can speak freely about the truth. So, Dr. Malone, again, what does it mean to invent mRNA vaccines? When you say that you invented mRNA vaccines, what does that mean?
What I'm really talking about is the platform technology, and it yielded a large number of patents. I don't know, it's 15 or 20 worldwide, that were all filed in 1989. So usually, I think inventorship is legitimately established through issued patents. And the core concepts, technology, much of what came off of my bench is still used to produce these products in many ways, but is scaled up. Now, there's been two major advances in the last decade. One of them is attributed to Drew Weissman and Katie Carrico, and that is the incorporation of pseudouridine to reduce the inflammatory response associated with mRNA that's externally administered. And the other that isn't often recognized in the press is the advances that Peter Cullis and his team at University of British Columbia have made in the core technology that I pioneered for RNA, which is the use of lipids for delivery. They've made a significant improvement in the nature of those lipids and their formulations. So it's Peter Cullis, University of British Columbia, and the company that's affiliated is Arcturus. Their lipids and formulation technology is used directly by CureVac and by BioNTech, ergo Pfizer. So that's kind of the big highlights of what's happened since then. But the all the inventions, the conception, the logic behind it, the core technology for the nature of the RNA, its structure, how it's manufactured, proof that it can be used, and the ideas about how it can be used both as a drug and as a vaccine all came out of those kind of intense years between 1987 and 1989. And then, as I said, there was a number of patents filed both by the Salk Institute and by Vical that issued. And people often say to me, well, how come there was this 20-year gap between the more modern commercial development and what you did back in the late 80s? The reason is because there's a 20-year lifespan on patents. And Vical and then Merck, which licensed it from Vical, were quite aggressive in keeping anybody else from working on that technology. They spent about $1 billion over the 20 years, maybe more, to try to bring a product forward, and they failed. But that didn't keep them from keeping anybody else from doing it. And you can read about that in the books that are being written about the CureVac story. So it's not my fault. I was operating as as an industrial scientist. My patents vested with Vical, and I got a total compensation of $1 US Susan B. Anthony dollar. Just so we're clear on the conflict of interest. I did not get wealthy from any of this. Have I answered your question?
Yes, no, that's very helpful. And again, just reiterates the fact that when we start talking about the vaccines and spike proteins and cytotoxicity and all that stuff, which I'm only going to be dancing around at this point because I'm going to show everybody the medical misinformation policy for YouTube in 1 second, that you have earned the authoritative right to speak your mind on this topic. And so I appreciate that. I did have a question real fast that I don't think is going to get us into too much trouble, and I wanted to pass it off with you. Other than the fact that someone did say, actually, Gain of Fauci is their name on on ROKFIN. Dr. Malone is someone I've seen much of recently in interviews, and he seems like a guy I could enjoy a beer with. So there you go.
Well, thanks. I occasionally have a beer, but I have gout, so I'm afraid it's you're welcome to hang out on the farm here. We got 50 acres in an extra house, and I'd love to sit on the porch and shoot the bull, but it may be one beer.
Okay.
Or I'd prefer, frankly, I'd prefer a glass of nice wine. We have some decent wine here in Virginia. Since I went to UC Davis, there's a little valley just north of Davis that makes a decent wine called Napa. And I think these days I hear there's even good wine made in Argentina.
Thank you for teeing me up for my little promotion. Before we get to the next question that just came in for Dr. Malone, which is, what is your view on the 1986 law that indemnified vaccine manufacturers? Should it be repealed to bring back responsibility and proper safety testing? I would like to let you know that you can get 50% off of my favorite high-altitude Argentinian wines and 50% off shipping by going to AllisonWinePromo.com. AllisonWinePromo.com. It's through Bronner Wine. One of the Malbecs comes from the third highest vineyard in the entire world at almost 9,000 feet. I like these wines. They're grown at such a high altitude. There's very little need for pesticides. They have no added chemicals, no dyes, and are just frankly really good. So if you like a robust red wine, you're into Malbecs, and you like wines that might be a little bit healthier, we could ask Dr. Malone if he thinks that. Definitely check it out. And they're also running a 4th of July special. So again, Allison with 1L winepromo.com, AllisonWinePromo.com. High altitude Argentinian Malbecs, my favorite. 50% off shipping and 50% off the wines themselves. Okay. So Dr. Malone, what do you think about that question about the 1986 law that indemnified vaccine manufacturers?
That's the first time I've been asked that question in this whole slew of podcasts that have come at me over the last 3 weeks.
Glad to throw one at you.
And what do I think about it? It's a complex question. The incentives for vaccines, and I think we're going to talk a little bit about entrepreneurship in this space, Allison, as I recall. So the incentives for building vaccines for pharma have historically been poor. and it hasn't been seen by most companies as a high yield area. And so there was the logic that, often the government thinks they can engineer the markets, and there are other ways they've tried to do it. Usually it doesn't work out very good. And this was one of those situations where the logic was, well, the reason why the vaccine manufacturers aren't interested in innovation and building new products is because they have this large liability tail. And so, hey, let's take it off their shoulders. In the current, I think it's a valid question that it should be revisited. Whether it could be revisited in the current climate, where I do a lot of work on the Hill too, and pharma owns the Hill. I mean, I'm sorry to give you that news in case it's probably a surprise to most of you, I'm being facetious, that the pharmaceutical industry has deep hooks into most of our congressional and Senate representatives, but that's the fact. So whether or not one could even practically go back on this in today's climate, I think I wouldn't think it would be a probable thing, but does it need to be revisited? Absolutely. Is there inherent conflicts that derive from that? Absolutely. And I try to live in the world of what we can improve rather than what we would like to improve. So that's my thoughts on that. I hope that's answered your question.
Yes, no, I think that does. Well, I'll see if the person responds, but it answered it for me. Let me ask you, before we get to some of the hot stuff that we're going to continue on ROKFIN, what do you think about the treatment you've received from the tech companies when you started talking about the issues with mRNA vaccines, concerns over mRNA vaccines? Before we get into the depths of those thoughts and concerns and what research is showing, what was the reaction from the tech companies? What kind of censorship have you faced? And what are your thoughts on that? I saw you tweet not too long ago of asking if the term we should use to describe it is called techno-fascism. And so I'd like to give you a chance to discuss a little bit of that.
Yeah, so that's not just about big tech, that term, and that comes out of a lot of since I went on this Brett, there was this Brett. Okay, I'm going to tell the story. So there was this Brett Weinstein Dark Horse podcast that involved me and Steve Kirsch. If nobody, probably most of you don't know who Steve is, he's a multi-hundred millionaire Silicon Valley engineer that designed the optical mouse, and he has a 20-year history of medical philanthropy. So I have deep respect for that commitment. Steve is not a biologist, and he had made a major investment in trying to advance the repurposed compound fluvoxamine and funding the Washington University to do that. And in doing that, he has had a fascinating journey through vagaries of the regulatory affairs process in the FDA. And at one point, he was frustrated with some of the things he was encountering, and somebody had told him that he should contact me. And so I tried to hold his hand a little bit with some of those transactions with the FDA and with some of the governmental agencies. And it was just amazing seeing the world through his eyes, things that we all take for granted, those of us that are in this space and have been in for decades. And we're kind of a little bit, I think, like the metaphor of the crab that you put in the pot and then you turn on the water and it slowly boils and it doesn't realize it's getting cooked. And sometimes I think in dealing with Steve, I feel like that crab, because Steve encounters these things and he basically goes, holy moly, this doesn't make any sense at all. And it's true, much of it doesn't. So it's been fun trying to help mentor Steve a little bit and guide him through his journey. But he independently ran into a series of encounters with people close to him that had to do with post-vaccination syndrome, post-genetic vaccination syndrome. And it triggered his alert bells. And he was already aware that there was something very odd about the drug repurposing space, because we just weren't getting any love from the government, frankly. And that just seemed paradoxical. There are some compounds that Brett advocates for. Steve is focused on fluvoxamine more. And we won't talk about Brett's compounds because those are specifically the one that will get you blacklisted. So we're not even going to use that I word. But so that's how this came about. And I got to say, 3 old men sitting around a small table talking for 3 hours going viral just seems paradoxical to me. I remain amazed. You know, talking about these esoteric issues having to do with the vaccines, I think what it teaches is that people are really, really hungry to try to understand what's going on, to try to understand the biology, the nature of the products. And they have lost faith in the official government line with a lot of this stuff. And they're just craving for open discussion and for information. Unfortunately, not everybody has had the pleasure, and I'm being facetious again, of 12 or more years of postgraduate training. And so a lot of the things can be a little hard to understand, and people can sometimes latch onto small comments or facts and run with them and misinterpret them. So that's one of the problems with the age of the internet, where everybody's a genius, and a PhD is granted by virtue of having a LinkedIn account. But so that video got about 800,000 views, and then YouTube took it down. They took down the prior one with Pierre Corey that was focused on the eye drug. And so
they
then
took
Brett
your entire video down. Is that what you're saying? The entire interview
the big 3-hour one. Now Brett made a sub clip that just has this famous line where I talk about things that we're not allowed to talk about right now, perhaps.
Well, this is up. Yeah, it has 2.2 million views.
I know. This is the small clip. This isn't the full 3-hour thing. The full 3-hour thing, you got to look at Bitly or one of the other.
Why are they allowing this to stay up, I wonder?
Because we don't talk about the eye drug.
Oh, okay. So you can say that the spike protein is very dangerous. It's cytotoxic. That's what this is titled, but you can't talk about the eye drug. Okay, got it.
Yeah, in YouTube land, that is allowed. Not maybe in some other places. And then, so that went along. And then I posted, I'm mostly a LinkedIn person. I've built my business on LinkedIn. I've got, must be at least a 15-year history, all kinds of information archived, prior presentations from the World Health Organization that I give, photos from inside key meetings with the Director General and ambassadors and stuff during the Ebola outbreak. All that stuff is all archived on LinkedIn, and it's all now been flushed. So fortunately, when they abruptly ghosted and deleted me, I think those are probably the right terms, or deplatformed and ghosted. So as far as all my LinkedIn buddies, it was about 6,000 at the time, were concerned. And these are mostly scientists and folks in the industry. They didn't give me any warning. They just did it. Boom. And I was actually about to do a podcast in DC. I was in a studio when suddenly I started getting calls saying, "What's happened to your LinkedIn presence? It's just gone." So that's a story. Fortunately, Steve is a Silicon Valley entrepreneur and friend. And as you know, in that area of the world, people are fairly well networked. He immediately called a buddy of his who is a vice president of LinkedIn and said, "What the heck is going on here?" And so I have had an interesting kind of insider view secondhand of the gears turning, to the extent that they turn at LinkedIn, and even some recent communications suggesting that after the holiday, I may be reinstated. The comment was made that LinkedIn had decided that they actually didn't have the talent to censor me. after Steve pointed out that various things that they had asserted were wrong were in fact right, and that my wording was carefully nuanced, just like what you're trying to say. But what was interesting was that the posts that they gave me six posts as examples for why they delisted me. One, for instance, was that I had posted an editorial from the Wall Street Journal. So that's, we can't talk about the Wall Street Journal, I guess, anymore. And the top one was the post, because Reuters has been, quote, fact-checking me, and they've really just twisted my words and distorted everything to make their points. And so my wife, a few days ago.
Real fast, this is one of the ones I found on PolitiFact.
Yeah, that's the PolitiFact, and then there's two from Reuters. And so my wife goes, Robert, you should see this. And she takes a clip out of LinkedIn from a Second Degree Connection. There's a guy named Jim Smith. Jim Smith is the chairman of the board of Reuters and also sits in the board of Pfizer. And so I posted that I thought that I said, do you think this is a conflict of interest question? I look forward to hearing your response. And of course, there was a goodly amount of comments back to more or less to the effect of, hell yes, that's a conflict of interest. And the next day I was delisted. Wow. And that was the post that they indicated as their top reason for deleting me. So they, and one of the others that they deleted me for, in general, it was that I had outed the chairman of the board of Reuters for his COI. I had posted the editorial about risks with the COVID vaccines, RNA vaccines, from the Wall Street Journal, and I had complained about censorship. So those are the reasons they censored me.
This is kind of hilarious, actually.
It is. It's even worse because they misspelled the subject line. So it seems that it was a custom thing that somebody hastily put together because of senior management pressure. At least that's the appearance.
Here or the Reuters one?
I'm talking about the actual messaging that I got from LinkedIn.
Oh, okay. I see.
Yeah.
Well, so this is the headline on a YouTube video, and a person who speaks in it make a troubling claim about the way COVID-19 vaccines work. Spike protein is very dangerous. It's cytotoxic, they say. So it doesn't even say, okay, all right, finally down here. They talk about who you are and what's going on. But, it's interesting because whenever these fact checks come out, they'll just say generally U.S. public health authorities or vaccine experts or whatever. And they make no allowance for the fact that there's a variety of thought among those people. They make it sound like everybody thinks the same thing. My old industry of mainstream news does exactly the same thing. They set it up as if you're science or you're anti-science. There's no variety in the science world, and only the dissenters are on the anti-science world. And you're just Joe Bob living out in the woods, wiping with your left hand, if you know what I mean, just playing the banjo. And it's ridiculous because it doesn't allow the public the opportunity to be, really thoughtful about their own conversations, because they approach somebody who's like, nah, I heard this.
Allison, and you might ask, why do they have this bias? And I can tell you that all of us in, physicians and scientists have all been scratching our heads. What the heck is going on? Those of us that have been through multiple outbreaks, we've never seen anything like this in its level of coordination across platforms. Okay. And Brett and I talk about that a little bit at the end of that long 3-hour podcast clip. And so one of the things that happened after we did that podcast is physicians and scientists and patients from all over the world, literally, have been sending me stuff. My phone is ringing all the time. My inbox is full. And I am getting a data feed of information from people that is incredibly rich. And one of them sends me this BBC press announcement concerning the Trusted News Initiative. And I pull that up and my mind kind of goes pop, because suddenly a lot of things come into focus. So the Trusted News Initiative is, you're going to pull it? Are you allowed to pull it? Yeah, so if you Google Trusted
Is
News
this something
Initiative,
we're allowed to
yeah, I
talk
think
about? I
so.
guess so. It's in the BBC.
So here's some key things for your viewership. Notice at the upper left-hand corner, this is a press release from the British Broadcasting Corporation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, this is an organization that was set up to, across multiple media platforms, including mainstream media and big tech, to ostensibly provide a mechanism so that we won't have another election that is getting manipulated through false information from offshore, I'll say gently. And so that was their reason for existence. And with this press announcement, apparently, I'm told the backstory is a new administrator came into the BBC and decided that what they needed to do was convert the TNI to focusing on misinformation relating to vaccines. So that was going to be the new mission. This is the press release that rolls that out. And if you can scroll down for your viewers to the last paragraph and then blow it up a little bit, if you can, with your fingers on your
I don't know
mouse
how to
pad.
do that. I'm dumb when it comes to that.
Okay,
I can read it though.
Yeah, so there's a line in there that lists the tech companies, the high level on the tech companies.
The partners currently within the TNI are AP, AFP, BBC, CBC Radio Canada, European Broadcasting Union, Facebook, Financial Times, First Draft, Google, YouTube, The Hindu, Microsoft, Reuters Institute for the Study of Journalism, Twitter, and the Washington Post.
Yeah, so no surprise that this is the list of folks that are censoring all of us, and they apparently have decided that the only truth is the truth that comes from the CDC, the WHO, Tony Fauci, and that level. They're not even looking at the nuance of what the European Medicines Agency might say. So those are considered to be truth. And you were being a little facetious a moment ago in your comments, but in fact, it's true. And this is actually the vehicle that is managing it. And so when I'm experiencing Reuters coming up with these twisted logic misrepresentations and attack pieces to question my validity, to question my conclusions or my statements, and they do so by really misstating what I've said. So they're refuting a straw man argument. Then this is the vehicle. It's no surprise that it's coming out of Reuters. It's also been noted by some on Twitter that Reuters has a particular predilection for attacking J&J and Sanofi, their competitors. So make of that what you will.
I did think it was interesting that Johnson & Johnson's taken the most heat. It seemed odd that you have issues with all of them. Again, we're going to move this to ROKFIN in actually just a couple minutes. We'll talk about that. But it did really seem weird to me that Johnson & Johnson was the one that was paused. Johnson & Johnson was the one that was getting the spotlight put on it.
Well, Sanofi, AstraZeneca also. So those are the two adenoviral vector platforms. And after we jump, we can talk more about the nuance of the whole suite of this category of vaccines that are non-traditional. I'm going to use that word at the moment.
Okay. This is why we're moving to ROKFIN. I'm going to show you all real fast. This is like a tale of two cities. It's so long. This is the medical misinformation policy for Google and YouTube. And it does say here that claims about COVID-19 vaccinations that contradict expert consensus from local health authorities or WHO, which includes claims that an approved COVID-19 vaccine will cause death, infertility, miscarriage, autism, or contraction of other infectious diseases, and then goes on to say a whole bunch of things. So I will be honest with you, even though we've actually had vaccines paused for some of that stuff. And so the news is even saying that, but it's still on the guideline page. And we're going to be talking about, say it again.
It'll still get you beheaded.
Yeah. It's just not allowed. So you guys, we're going to nuke the stream now. I appreciate everybody who's been watching on YouTube. We're going to continue this over on ROKFIN. I will put a link again in actually, you should see a link in the description of this video, and I'm going to add the link right now into the chat so you can click that and head on over. But this is when the real fun begins. We appreciate everybody watching on YouTube. We will see you over on ROKFIN.